Welcome to ACC, and we're going to be giving you some setup guides. So if you don't know how to set up your car in ACC, by the end of this video, you are going to be a setup, I don't want to say setup master, but you're going to know the basic setup. I'm here with Nathan, who you'll recognise from all of these Logitech McLaren G challenge videos. We've unboxed Logitech Pro wheel and pedals. We've talked about the competition where the grand prize is you can meet Lando Norris at the Red Bull F1 race in Austria coming up this year. Incredible prize. And we're also going to be giving away a Logitech Pro wheel and direct drive and load cell pedals to people who can beat my lap time on PC. But also, very excited to say, Logitech are going to be giving away another wheel, probably a G923, and pedals for people who can beat my lap time on ACC console. So whether you're on ACC console or PC, this video is hopefully great for you. We're going to give you the setups here that are really going to help you in the McLaren G Challenge. So Nathan, we're here at Misano. And by the way, let me introduce Nathan properly. Nathan's a really fast driver on ACC, also a very fast karter in real life, has won endurance races in real life. I know I've raced against him and he's won. And Nathan really likes setting up cars, and we're going to get some great insight in this video. Link in the description below for Nathan's channel for more karting. Right, so here we go, Nathan. Let's go into the setup folder here for the McLaren 720S. And where do you recommend people start when it comes to a setup?
Well, the 720S being a mid-engined car, it really works on oversteer and cornering speed, whereas the front engine cars, they got the brute power, Mercedes, the Bentleys, they've got the speed down the straights, but the mid-engine cars, they really gain the speed in the corners. So a safe setup in a mid-engine car is probably the equivalent of an aggressive setup in a front engine car. But, as you get used to these aggressive or safe setups, you're going to want a bit more speed in the corners. You're going to want a bit more speed down the straights, a bit more stability. Some even prefer instability in the braking zones.
Yeah.
That's where you get into the individual setup, the sliders,
Yeah.
the ride heights, the brake biases. But aggressive setup is a good place to start. It does require a bit more precision over the safe setup, but it will always give you a faster lap time. So let's check out the aggressive setup.
Let's do it.
So the PSIs, it's a trial and error thing with the PSIs. It depends on the track temperature.
So 27.8 is really where you want to get to.
27.3 to 27.8 is the optimal operating range for tire pressure. So you want to aim for 27.5. It just means you can push a little bit more on the tires if you are at 27.5. Or if you do find yourself up at 27.8, maybe you have to tone down your driving style a little bit.
Yeah.
Or bring down the pressure a little bit.
So Misano being a clockwise circuit, we're expecting left front to take a beating.
Yeah.
So I suspect that we would be increasing the PSI on the right rear, for example, more.
Yeah. So the right tires, they're not going to get used as much as the left tires around this track because you're turning towards the right a lot more than you are towards the left, which means the left tires will get abused a little bit more.
Yeah.
The PSI should be lower on the left because you're using them more, you're generating more heat in those tires. So naturally the PSI is going to rise with the temperatures.
Because hotter air expands in the tyre.
Yeah. So, generally, the presets for the tires the PSIs are okay. Depending on the track temperature, anywhere between 25 and 30 degrees, the preset is good. Anything above, you might have to, I think maybe if it's, my usual rule is, say it's 27 at the moment.
Yeah, see here.
It's a good place to start, 25.3, 26.1. But say if it was up to 35 degrees, for example, I'll take it down by about 3 clicks on each tire.
Yeah.
So roughly, per degree, imagine maybe like 0.9 psi. 0.09 psi per degree is roughly my rule. It gets a bit technical, but it's trial and error at the end of the day.
Yeah. So go out, do a few laps, get up to speed.
You do have to do a few laps.
See where your PSIs are out on the track, and then work backwards in the garage. Yeah.
Yeah. If you find by the end of 4 laps that your tires are a whole 1 psi above 27.5, you want to bring it down by about 0.9 psi, then you should be in the correct operating range.
So that's PSIs, which to be fair, really important, because if you
They
go
are
out of that
important.
window, you just lose all of the grip and you have that sliding
Yeah.
sensation.
Yeah, if your tires are under pressured, there's too much movement in the rubber, and that can cause the tire to overheat, and it's not supporting that corner of the car. The correct pressure in the tire will also support the weight as well as the suspension supporting the weight of the car.
So for that pressure, you have it's strong. It's strong there in terms of contact with the ground.
Yeah, it's important that the pressure is also supporting that corner of the car. Otherwise, it's gonna dip too much. You'll start sliding because there's not enough pressure. It's gonna generate even more heat, and it's a spiral. It's a spiral in the wrong direction, basically.
Yeah. The other stuff here, camber toe, caster. Do you think that's particularly important?
I mean, I'm gonna let a secret out. Every setup I've seen, it's usually just maxed out to, so toe would be all the way negative, what you can get. Camber would be all the way negative. But I mean, even when you go to the fuel and strategy page, see you've got wear 3.0, 3.0, 3.0. That's basically telling you how much tread is left on the tires. Even if you were to go max camber, I find the inside shoulder of the tire never wears out enough to justify turning the camber down.
Okay. Yeah, I understand.
The outside shoulder of the tire will always wear fairly evenly. It will be less on the outsides because the tires are, they're facing in like that. So the insides of the tires will always wear out more, but it's never enough to justify having to turn the camber value down.
So what you can do is, because this is tyre set 1, right? So if we went out on tyre set 1, we could come in and see the data on tyre set 1, and then adjust and go to tyre set 2, just like a real track day.
It's nice that it tells you how your tires wear depending on your setup. Because that's what the top teams do. They use the data after the car's been out. They check the tires, under a microscope sometimes to see how the tire has worn, to see what they have to do to improve their tire wear. Also, camber's important for the grip of the car as well. If your tire's facing in too much, the car's never going to lean enough to benefit from the surface area of the tire. The idea of camber is so that as the car leans over to the side, if both tires are like that when you're going down the straight, as you brake and turn, the lean of the car will bring that tire pretty much upright. And if the tire's upright, it's pretty much square to the floor. Maximum grip, maximum surface area with the tarmac.
It's funny because there's so many different philosophies going on here, and it's not simple, is it? You can't there's not one silver bullet. You've got to really, I think, understand all these different bits that are going on. I mean, that's why the values are there. They're there to be adjusted, and how can I say? Sometimes you'd even abuse these to make use of the physics engine of the game, of the simulation. But that's why I started off by saying that those values are always maxed out. I don't know the logical explanation why, but every setup I see, every time I talk to someone about setups, it's always just max out those values. It's just in that way, it's a bit of a cheat code, an immediate advantage. So we can try this minusing these, right?
Yeah, just all the way, and the camber as well, all the way.
Same on the rear or out the other way?
Yeah, all the way.
So we will see kind of what this feels like. And then electronics you can adjust this on the fly as well in the car.
You can do.
What's your view on you dipping into TC? You avoid it at all costs, really, or is it inevitable to...
I mean, this is where this chart comes in handy. I always used to ignore this chart, but you can see that it's telling you, I mean, the McLaren, how many settings of traction control does the McLaren have? Is it 12?
12.
Okay. Well, the chart isn't exactly specific per car, but it gives you a good idea of what to expect. So it's saying, let's start at the wet side. Full wet, it's recommending max traction control. A rubbered in track, well, they call it optimum,
Yeah,
is when, you know, cars have been driving all day.
yeah,
There's loads of rubber on the track, and it makes the track a lot more grippy.
yeah.
So you wouldn't need so much traction control because the tires are gripping the surface really well. So that's
Have you ever got a situation where you've lowered TC progressively in a race? Because that's something that I've actually never done.
no, I don't think there's a need because usually practice sessions start off green,
Hmm.
qualifiers are fast,
Yeah,
as in like medium rubber, and by the time you get to the race, it's optimum,
yeah,
which I guess is fairly realistic
yeah.
to how GT3 runs
And
in
even
real
if you're doing
life.
endurance race, it'll be all that practice beforehand.
Yeah, endurance racing, you know, you're almost always going to be
What I don't
loaded.
know is if you have mixed conditions.
If you have mixed, you'd have to adjust it on the fly.
Yeah,
Um, Once it goes to damp, you know, you're probably going to up it to, if you have it at one in optimum, once
yeah,
it goes damp, you're going to want it up to like 3 or 4.
yeah,
Full wet, I mean, you're probably going to have to up it to maybe 6 or 7.
So a wheel like the Logitech always has these rotary dials.
Yeah,
That's something that you could map on the fly using them.
yeah,
and just
definitely,
up
definitely.
and down.
With
Now-
that, because it's quite handy with the Logitech wheel, you've got 2 dials.
Yeah, it's
You
true.
could dial one for the ABS, I mean, sorry, the brake bias,
Yeah,
and one for the traction control,
yeah,
which I think is really handy. Some of the wheels, I mean, my one, I've only got one rotary knob.
What I don't know is if there's a modifier, we can hold another button and then you can use it to do something else. If I press that, it does ABS. If I don't have it, it does. We'll have to look at that and let you know in the comments. But
That'd be a good idea.
the Logitech Pro will definitely, we noticed it when we unboxed it, it has these 2 dials.
Yeah.
We were like, that's going to be great for ACC and iRacing particularly. ABS, I know a lot of people don't like dipping into ABS at all.
Yeah.
I don't know what your view is. Depends on cars sometimes, can it?
ABS can disturb your turning, as in if you're holding too much brake at the point where you're starting to turn the wheel, you're offloading that inside front tire. There's not enough weight to force that rubber into the ground and it starts to lock. And the ABS, you know, it grabs the disc like that, but really, really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And it's creating micro slides across the ground. And it forces you to understeer a little bit. So, I mean,
if the ABS is engaging, because really you should be on the brake and either off the brake or trail braking. So if you're in an ABS situation, because ABS does, then you're already in a suboptimal situation basically.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
So if you're a very smooth driver, you shouldn't actually be using it at all. You might have some ABS with braking in a straight line.
If you're braking in a straight line, you know, all 4 corners of the car should be planted enough to not have to engage the ABS. And what's handy about ACC is the brake bar starts to glow yellow as you're activating the ABS.
Yeah.
It's a good indicator to see, you know, are you pressing the brake too hard, too late into the corner? Because as you're traveling at very high speed, the downforce is pushing the car into the road.
Yeah.
As you start to scrub that speed off as you're braking, there's less downforce pushing the car into the road. So the ABS is more likely to engage at a lower speed just before you're turning. That's the difficulty of it. And as you start to turn in, you start to affect the weight distribution, start to lock up some of the wheels. So generally, I like to go for a fairly low ABS setting.
Yeah.
I usually stay around 4 ABS in the
Yeah.
McLaren, never really higher than that. But something that majorly affects your ABS activation is your brake bias. If your brake bias is too towards the front in a mid-engine car, you're going to be locking up the wheels that don't have that much weight on them.
Because the engine's on the back.
Engine's at
It's
the
a bit
back.
light, yeah.
Yeah, so if you've got too much pressure going to the front wheels, you're more likely to lock up. You need to make use of that brake bias to evenly distribute it across the car. Not only will it help your turning, but it will make it less likely to engage the ABS when you start to turn in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't like having too much ABS.
And that indicator is really helpful because it's hard to tell where the bar is on braking, but because it flashes, you know it's engaging. I know on iRacing, a lot of the cars have the indicators left and right on the display.
yeah,
You can
yeah,
see
yeah.
them go up as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good indicator. It's again, you might not think it's telling you a lot, but you can learn a lot about your own driving style and how to get the most out of the car just by seeing what it's telling you. It's telling you, I don't like what you're doing in this fraction of a second. You're asking too much of this particular tire, that particular tire. You're gonna have to change something.
Yeah. ECU map and telemetry, I don't actually know what they do, to be honest.
ECU map. You see, there's no information within ACC
Yeah,
to tell you what's the best ECU map per car.
yeah,
Like in the Porsche, I
Yeah.
used to run ECU map 1, thinking 1 was the fastest.
yeah,
It wasn't until I went online to a Wikipedia page,
yeah.
I found out ECU map 8 was the fastest for the Porsche.
That's a bit mad.
Yeah, like ECU map 1 on the McLaren is the fastest one.
Yeah,
But sometimes one's not exactly faster than the other. It just means that the acceleration aggressiveness
yeah,
is a little bit different. For example, 2
yeah,
on the McLaren would mean that if you were to stamp on the throttle, it wouldn't give you so much immediate power.
okay,
Whereas 1, it gives you that immediate power.
yeah.
But when you're looking for all those temps, you want that immediate power.
So
You just want to know how to control that
Is
power.
this representing like a linear delivery, or is it just different presets?
From 1 to 4,
Yeah.
I think changes the delivery.
Yeah,
I think something like from 4 to 8
Yeah.
is the wet settings,
okay,
and from 8 to 12 is fuel saving settings,
Yeah.
something like that. I don't know exactly, but that's how you're gonna have to look it up per
Yeah.
car, whichever car you're driving. You're gonna have to look it up, find out the information, because there's nowhere within PCC that lets you know that.
yeah. That seems properly detailed, that stuff. This is all nothing really to talk about here, actually. Just this is where you change tyre sets, wet dryers. Oh, you got the
Yeah.
the.
I mean,
are these
fuel.
ducts. I can't remember what these are.
No, those are pads.
Pads. Yeah.
Again, this is something that ACC doesn't let you know within the game. Pad 1 is the hardest,
Yeah.
most aggressive brake pad.
Quali pads.
Yeah. They can last up to 3 hours, I think, as long as you're not mashing the brake.
Yeah.
They will last up to a 3-hour race. It will be a bit tricky towards the end.
But any sprint.
Any sprint, any 20-minute race, qualifying, use pad 1. That's
Yeah.
just, it's giving you the best braking power.
Yeah.
Again, it does come with its difficulties. You're more likely to engage the ABS.
Yes.
It does come with its difficulties.
But you'll have a sharper sort of point to stop.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
anything for Logitech McLaren G Challenge, I think, is 1-1. You're going to be fastest.
most likely, yeah. Fuel, obviously, you don't want too much fuel in the car while you're qualifying.
Yeah.
Even while you're racing, you don't want too much fuel. It might be handy to calculate how much fuel you use per lap
Yeah.
in practice or qualifying settings.
Yeah.
Because if you come to a 20-minute race, you don't always get told how many laps it's going to be.
No. So
But,
you have to work it out, because this is per lap.
You do have to work it out, yeah.
20-minute race. How many minutes is a lap?
Yeah, if you've got, what's the closest lap to 2 minutes? Probably Bathurst. If you're very quick, it's
Maybe.
Bathurst.
Yeah.
Monza, for example,
150 something, isn't it?
is, I know Monza, I need about 45 litres for a 20-minute race.
Yeah.
Again, it's car dependent. Some cars use a lot more fuel per lap than others. I think the BMW is probably one of the worst on fuel. It
Maybe.
uses the most. Whereas the Porsche, I use the Porsche quite a lot. It's fairly frugal on fuel compared to other cars. So
Yeah.
you could get away with putting maybe 41 litres compared to 45.
Someone, I think Logitech McLaren G Challenge, if I remember, might have been well, the race is 10 minutes, isn't it? It's a 10-minute race for the qualifying that we did.
Yeah,
So you can work that, and I can't remember what the qualifying was. It might have just been 5 minutes, actually.
qualifying was 5 minutes.
5 minutes. So if you're going out here with max fuel,
Yeah.
it's be what, 120 or something, 125 litres. Just leaving time on the table, and it will just be heavier. You're going to be hard on the tyres. So
Yeah.
bit
I
of
think
maths there.
when you fill up and when you exit the pits, you get a rough indication on your heads-up display
Yeah,
about how many laps you're expected to complete.
yeah,
and you also get a live reading of how much fuel you've used in the previous lap.
Yes.
So using that information, you can calculate how much fuel you're going to need for a 20-minute race,
Yeah.
25-minute race. I've narrowed it down to 5-minute intervals with my cars.
Yeah.
So the Porsche, I need 44 litres for Monza. That's for 20 minutes. If the race was to go up to 25 minutes, I know I've got to put 55 litres in.
Add another level.
Because every 5 minutes equates to 11 litres of fuel.
Yeah.
So 5 minutes, 11 litres. If it's a half an hour race, 66 litres, for example. But, you know, it's just one of them things you're going to have to learn as you go along.
Yeah. And as a general rule of thumb, I wouldn't go too harsh on it.
No, you don't want to cut it too tight.
Yeah. Right, so here we go. This is where it starts to get a bit... This is where you can actually really dramatically change the feel of the car.
Yeah.
So we've got anti-roll and the preload as well. This is why I think a lot of people watching you probably like, I don't feel comfortable in this stuff. Let us know in the comments if you don't, by the way, because interesting for us to know. But
so the first thing I would go for is the brake bias.
Yeah.
The brake bias can have much more effect on your car's feeling, your car's feedback than any of these. For example, 58 brake bias in a mid-engine car is actually quite front focused.
Yeah.
I think cars like the Bentley, the lowest you can go is 57%.
Wow.
Because all the weight's on the front. There's no point having it further back than that.
Because the rear wheels are actually like, it's sort of slant at the front, right?
Yeah.
So the rear wheels are they're lighter.
Yeah, there's no weight on the rear. So it makes no sense in a front engine car having it lower. What's the lowest setting that the McLaren can go to?
47.
47.0. Yeah, that would probably be a bit tricky. So imagine we both do karting, right?
Yeah.
The brakes are on the rear
Yeah.
in the cars that we drive. What you're trying to gain by adjusting the brake bias towards the rear is the effect of locking up the rear wheels.
Yeah.
As you lock up the rear wheels, you know the car starts to,
You can use that to your advantage.
Yeah.
Just get it in the corner.
Yeah, so as you're approaching the corner, you want the car to be going like that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you don't have to put that much steering angle into it.
Normally, you're actually counter-steering a little bit what you've got from the pitch,
Yes, that's the effect you're trying to get with this brake bias. You're not locking up the rear wheels, but you're under-rotating them just enough to get that effect still. The most in the Bentley.
Yeah.
If I put the Bentley brake bias to the rear, as far as it can go, the car just wants to step out.
Which can
all
be,
the way.
if you don't understand that, it can be quite uncomfortable. You think this car's really unsettled on the brakes.
Yeah.
But if you just lean into it and think, right, well, every time I go into a braking zone, I'm going to be prepared for that, and suddenly I get nice slip angle as well and nice early rotation.
That's the thing. When it comes to the end of that braking zone, the car can be so perfectly positioned with the back sticking out that, you know, it just feels like it just wants to go around the corner.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit, I'd say it's more stable in mid-engine cars having the brake bias towards the rear, because you've got more weight on that rear anyway to keep it planted. In the front engine cars, if the brakes are at the back, it wants to fishtail, whereas the mid-engine cars are a bit more stable if you've got them at the back. I'd say go for a 51% brake bias for this car. This will also help eliminate that ABS kicking in the front as you approach the end of your braking zone.
Yeah.
Because there's not that much pressure on the front compared to the rear. The rear will be doing a lot of the braking work into the corner.
So you have to be really aware here. When you're going into, say, turn 1 at Misano, which is sort of a corner where you're getting ready to turn in, there's a lot of action with the rear wheels there. A lot of weight, the brakes going on there.
Yeah.
And so if you're not prepared for it, then there's a lot of load going on in the rear, and you need to use it to your advantage, otherwise you're going to feel like this is very unsettled.
Yeah.
It's definitely not going to feel understeery.
No, it won't. It won't. The rear are going to be under-rotating, so the whole car is going to be almost sliding in the corner. Almost. On a microscopic level, it is sliding. But it's not sliding too much that it's uncontrolled. So yeah, I'd say brake bias is the most singly important thing on this page. If you had one choice to adjust one thing, it would be the brake bias. As for the rest of it, I'm not too glued up. I know that if I struggle with too much oversteer, I would up the front anti-roll bar to a stiffer setting. Because what I think it's doing, this is just the way it might not be right, but it's the way I think about it. If the front of your car is rolling too much into the corner, say, what's the fast corner at Spa, the fast left hand? Is it Puan?
Yeah.
If you're braking into that corner and you find you're just turning it like doing a 180 straight away, you're gonna have to up the front anti-roll bar, because what's happening is the car's dipping to the front as you're braking, then it's dipping over to the side too much
to allow it to come around.
Yeah.
So if you steadied it, you'd make it a bit more understeery.
Yeah. So what you're trying to, instead of the car going like that and then like that, and then losing the rear, you want the car to go like that and turn to the lean over to the side a little bit. A little bit. It will make both front wheels a bit more, planted into the ground. And it will stop the rear from, almost like a kart again. As you're turning in really heavily, the rear wheel comes up.
Well,
the rear inside will come. If you're turning left at a high speed,
it's solid axle, so it will just come.
The rear left will come up. If that happens too much in these cars, you're going to spin. That's what I think the front stability is front roll bars for. With this track having a lot of high speed sections into a lot of low speed corners, I would assume you need quite a stiff front anti-roll bar. If it's too low, you're going to go into them corners carrying too much speed, it's going to lean too much, and you're going to end up spinning every corner.
Maybe let's go up 2 bumps and see. Alright, okay, now let's do aero first, because this is actually arguably the simplest bit of setups normally. Aero,
I think, is the next most important after brake bias.
So we've got ride height and we've got wing, basically.
The way I'd explain this is, you've got the front of the car, rear of the car. If the front of your car is too high, there's going to be too much weight on the rear of the car. GT3 cars are very, very pitch and weight distribution sensitive.
If the rear's high, that also means when you get on the brakes, it's gonna be quite unstable, right? Whereas if you slam on the brakes as you go, then it's gonna pitch forward. Whereas if your front's already balanced, you're not gonna have that massive swing, because that's what I sort of feel. It's like sometimes you go like that.
That can be adjusted in the suspension settings, in the damper settings, but we'll get to that. The front ride height, I generally like to keep it as low as possible. I like to keep the whole car as low as possible, because it makes it a much better aero package. And you want the car to be low, you want the car to be stable.
Would you go all the way?
I'd go all the way to the lowest setting for the front. Because all it means, right, is front of the car is low, back of the car is high. If the back of the car is really, really high, it's going to be, imagine all the weight is on the front and the rear is pivoting on the front. That is, to an effect, what you're trying to achieve by having a high rear. However, if it's too high, it's going to be too unstable in the corners. What it would be, though, is very, very fast in the low-speed corners. If, what do they call it? Spinning on a dime? What's that setting?
Spin like a top. I don't know.
No. What's that football setting that
turn on a 50p piece?
Yeah, something like that. Imagine your car's doing that, because the rear is so high. It's able to rotate around much easier. So these tight corners at Misano, you're gonna want the rear to be high to get around the really low speed tight corners quicker. If the rear is too low, it's gonna be too planted. Again, like karting, a lot of the weight is on the rear. We know in the wet, if we know you've got too much weight on the rear in the wet. As you try to turn, nothing happens on the front for a fraction of a second.
You turn it and you just go straight immediately.
Nothing happens until you hold it, and then it starts to go around.
And then it's bringing you around, isn't it? Because that's why you use a throttle to push you around even more.
That's what will happen if your car's too low on the rear. But there is a balance to reach here. If your car's too high, it's going to be too unstable in the braking zones. You're not going to have enough weight on the back to get the traction down for the acceleration zones as well. So you do want to be as high as possible, but there's a limit.
Yeah.
What you achieve with the rear wing is to balance that aero imbalance.
Because that's pushing it down, right?
Yeah. What the wing does is make it stable in the higher speed corners. If you go to Spa, a track like Spa, with a very, very high rear, you're not going to make it around a lot of the corners. Blanchimont, Pouan.
It's just going to be too loose in the back.
It will be way too loose on the back. So what you're trying to achieve is just balancing that rear with the wing. It won't have an effect on the slow corners, but the slow corners, you're not really going fast enough to lose it like that.
Yeah.
So what you need is slow corners, a high rear, fast corners, a lot of downforce, and there's a balance to reach between the two.
Yeah, it reminds me, was it the Williams car had like all that active funky suspension in Formula One? There was a Formula One car that had like in the 90s active, and it was completely banned, but it could move on its own like in the pits.
Okay.
So I imagine stuff like that. You have a map.
Yeah.
Sort of just ultimate.
Yeah.
Because here it's fixed. For the whole
it's
circuit.
fixed. So you have to find the right balance for the whole track. Immediately looking at that, I mean, I've done a setup before for Misano, and I had the rear at 79 mil.
Oh wow, okay.
And the front was at 50.
Yeah.
But I had the rear wing at max level, because you have got quite a few fast corners. Turn 1 is a fairly fast corner.
Well, yeah, especially near the end of the circuit, you've got some very fast corners.
Near the end, you've got those 3 fast corners. Yeah. And also the second to last corner.
Yeah, which is actually
corner.
just about flat, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a fairly fast corner. You're going to lose it if you haven't got the wing. So, yeah, this looks good to me. As the temperature is quite high, I open up the brake ducts a bit.
Yeah.
The mid-engine cars usually suffer on the rears.
Yeah.
But they suffer more on the tyres than the brakes.
Yeah.
Any car in an ACC always uses the front brakes a bit more, just because the weight is going to the front.
Yeah.
The front brakes are working harder, no matter what car. So I'd always have the front open up a little bit more if needed. But again, you've got a temperature indicator on your screen. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to work out how much opening you need on your brake ducts. But they also help a little bit with tyre cooling.
Okay.
So sometimes you sacrifice having cold brakes to keep your tyres a little bit cooler.
What do you do in wet weather conditions with ducts?
I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think you just have to regulate that they're not getting too hot still.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's not much point closing the brake ducts hoping that you keep the temperature.
Yeah.
Because water gets everywhere.
Yeah,
when in wet weather, I guess. It's obviously cooling the tyres down. It's cooling the brakes down at a much more rapid rate.
Yeah.
So I don't think you have to worry about closing them in the wet.
Because you already got that water on.
Yeah, you just have to manage your brake and tyre temperatures through brake ducts.
Okay, so the last area in AC is dampers. This is going over curbs and stuff like that, isn't it?
Yeah,
Depends on the circuit a lot.
Yeah, what I understand is the bump settings are to do with how much the car dips on the dampers.
Yeah.
The rebound settings are to do with how the car rebounds. But those bump and rebound are more related to steering inputs, throttle inputs, and brake inputs.
Yeah.
How the car responds to being chucked around on the brakes, on the throttle. Fast bump, however, is how the dampers react to striking curbs, striking the end of the track. You know, much more of a shock impact
Yeah.
is what the fast bumps are for. So, Misano, we know that there's a lot of sausage curbs.
Yeah, little annoying
You know,
ones.
some of the edges of the track are very rough.
And if you're bouncing off there, you're gonna keep going off the track.
Yeah, so if your fast bump is too soft, it's not gonna be good for the car. But I think the fast bump should be very stiff.
Yeah.
At this track, so that would be all the way to the front, to the top.
Yeah.
Now in the braking zones, some of these braking zones you have to straddle the curb.
Yeah.
So
to widen your entry.
Some people straddle turn 1.
Yeah.
Some people straddle turn 6 braking zone.
Is that into the long sort of hairpin-ish?
Yeah. Yeah. So after the double right and the left, you got turn 6. It might be turn 7 actually, because there's that little kink in the road.
And also penultimate corner and last corner.
Yeah.
And exit of last corner.
Yeah. So what you don't want is the car dipping too much, and the front splitter striking the curb.
Yeah.
Because that will obviously unsettle the car.
And that's when you get those really big vibrations.
Yeah, and you hear it as well.
Yeah.
In the game, which is handy feedback. Being able to hear that. So the bump where it is, it looks okay. You don't want it to be too stiff, because then the car's not going to dip enough to be able to rotate into the corners. These cars, they're so weight distribution and pitch sensitive. You know, front to rear weight balance, left right weight balance.
Yeah.
They're so sensitive. You don't want it to not dip enough, because then it's just not going to turn. It's going to be the same effect as having a very, very stiff front suspension. So the bump levels look okay to me.
Yeah.
I'd up the rebound a little bit.
Yeah.
Because by the time it does, you know, dip, you don't want it to be... Oh, this is where I struggle with the rebound, actually. I don't like having the bump and the rebound completely different values. I would, on the whole, keep them, you know, roughly the same.
Yeah.
Because if it's going down at a rate, I want it to come up
back
at a rate. I don't want it to go down slowly and spring back up.
Yeah.
So I usually keep them consistent.
But yeah, this is a very important setting for certain tracks. I'm thinking like Monza.
Yeah, I don't even... I'm not even 100% confident with damper settings.
Yeah.
This is just... It's very rough from what I've read. Because again, ACC, it doesn't explain these things.
It leaves up to you.
That
That's
explanation... I mean, some people would probably make sense of that from their experience from other simulations.
It's not enough. They need to use all of this white space.
Yeah, they've got all that white space. Use it. But yeah, I mean, again, but my theory is that, you know, if I've got the fast bump at a level, I'd keep the fast rebound consistent with that as well. So I'd up them to the max as well, the fast rebounds.
Nice.
But again, this is what I've learned from seeing professional setups, trying it myself, and seeing, you know, it's actually...
But we can see there's a philosophy here. The thing that's really difficult about setups is that we've changed so much. If we go out and we don't like something, you need to sort of identify. There's a real skill in like trying to identify what it could be. Because everything you change affects something else, like this compared to the preload and the anti-roll and everything. And if your tyres aren't correct, then that's... to identify it, and it's like there's a real... to me, it becomes more of an art than a science, actually, like intuition. And there's also just, you have to enjoy the process. It's not a fix it quick, 100% thing.
It takes a lot of time
to
learn how... If you want to learn how to set up your own cars, it takes a lot of time. And you have to be very in tune with your setup, like your rig, your setup, and your mind as well. You have to be very in tune with what you're feeling. Because then you change something, and you're like, oh, I know that's changed the
arguably, this is really what sim racing is about, right?
Is it?
Because this is simulating all the different bits of the car. It's not just you get in and you drive like, you know, a first-person bumper camera. This is every little bit is simulating, has an effect. And yeah, there'll be some bits that you can try and gamify, like the Camber, but at least there's a reason why.
Well, that's a mechanical grip. I don't think we changed everything there. the steer ratio is, what do they call it, the steering rack?
Yeah.
How responsive it is.
Yeah.
I think with this track being such a tight track, you want a bit of speed in the steering rack. So I'd up that maybe 1 or 2 clicks.
All right.
Rear anti-roll bar. I would up that.
Yeah.
Because it increases the oversteer. On the whole, that's the general philosophy. A stiff anti-roll bar. Oh, have I got that wrong?
Well, let's try and work out. So you've got a stiff anti-roll bar.
Yeah.
You're going to have less on the back, sort of pitching.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for the outside wheel? If you have a looser anti-roll bar, when you turn in, are you loading the outside wheel more, or like a kart? Because a kart has the stiffest rear axle, which is a similar effect, right? And therefore, I would assume if it's really loose, it's just kind of mushy, and you're not actually.
So the thing is,
I might be wrong.
I've tried different anti-roll bar settings for different cars.
Yeah.
Sometimes 0 anti-roll bar feels better mid-corner.
Yeah.
Sometimes max anti-roll bar just gives it a bit more stability.
Yeah.
And I think if you're turning into a corner, if there's no anti-roll bar,
yeah,
it's gonna the rear inside is gonna lift too much.
Yeah.
That could help the turning.
Yeah.
Just like a cart.
Yeah.
You want to lift that inside rear. You got the other 3 tires.
Essentially, it's not understeering you.
Yeah, you've got the other 3 tires perfectly loaded.
Yeah.
And it feels like, it should turn in a bit better. But then again...
But these have a diff.
It's true. It's
so
true.
If you've got a diff, do you want that extra grip?
It's true. But then again, I think if you have a max anti-roll bar on the rear...
Yeah.
You're trying to keep both rear tires down.
Yeah.
And that can encourage a bit of a oversteery feeling.
Yeah.
Encourage a bit of a slide.
Yeah.
I don't know which way ACC have gone with it.
Basically, let us know in the comments if you know on the rear anti-roll bar.
But
I think on the whole,
I would up
Misano,
it though.
Yeah.
Based on setups I've seen, setups I've used.
I think it was 4 to begin with, so we can go 8-8.
Yeah.
But I think on the whole, for Misano doing this is the first knockout round of the Logitech McLaren G Challenge. This would be your first race where you can get eliminated, so you really want to do well. A setup like this, definitely test it, see how it feels. It may help you in your driving style, basically.
Yeah, but it's very driver specific.
Yeah.
Some drivers would prefer a more frontward brake bias because they like braking in a straight line. Some would prefer more rearward because they like trail braking a bit more.
Yeah.
Some would prefer a slightly lower rear because they turn the wheel more physically.
Yeah.
If other drivers prefer a very nervous rear, it would encourage, trying to keep the wheel a bit straighter through the corners. But again, a lot of it is trial and error.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's Misano in the McLaren 720S. I think we're going to head to Brands Hatch next, which is in the... Is that in the
570.
570.
GT4.
Oh, well, let's do it. If you did enjoy that, make sure to subscribe. Ask us any questions you've got in the comments as well. And we're heading over to Brands Hatch.